Brexit is very much top of the agenda in politics today, this eighth round of talks. There's a big row over the withdrawal agreement and Northern Ireland. Many thought that Northern Ireland had been thrown under a bus for the withdrawal agreement, effectively allowing Northern Ireland to be treated differently from the rest of the UK by the EU because of that land border with the Republic of Ireland and with the EU effectively. But many are now saying that Boris is causing even more trouble now. And it's actually a matter of trust, says the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, that he's now saying that agreement needs to be rewritten, saying it's legally ambiguous. So what is going on? Let's talk to Andrea Leadsom, Tory MP, former business secretary and leading Brexiteer as well. Good morning to you, Andrea.
Morning, Julia.
That's the first question. What is going on? Because we're told that it's just by the government. This is just minor clarifications in extremely specific areas. It's going to be published in this internal market bill on Wednesday, and it's just about what happens with Northern Ireland and customs in the event there isn't a trade deal. At the same time, we've got Boris Johnson giving a deadline of October the 15th for a deal to be done. Is this just sort of, just dotting the I's and crossing the T's and making sure everything's in place in the event that there isn't a trade deal? Or is this some game playing that's putting the situation for Northern Ireland in an even more precarious position?
No, it's seeking to sort out the ambiguity that was in the withdrawal agreement that the overall plan was to have resolved during the meetings with the Joint Committee on the Free Trade Deal. So essentially, it was all supposed to have been part of these free trade deal negotiations. And what the UK Internal Market Bill seeks to do is to unilaterally provide the clarity that makes sure Northern Ireland is protected as a part of the United Kingdom. And it will only come into place if those EU talks fail and we don't have a deal with the EU by the end of this year.
How likely do you think it is that we will get a deal? There seems to be quite a breakdown of trust with what Ursula von der Leyen has been saying, and quite a lot of concern that there's been just such a deadlock on the issues of fishing rights, and also over the situation in terms of state aid. Is there any room for manoeuvre here?
The issue for the EU is that it is as much in their interests as it is in ours to get a free trade deal. What we want to see is something like the free trade deal with Canada. So not something brand new, just something that will work with zero tariffs and with the ability to continue to trade freely between different sovereign nations. It's not too much to ask. It's very clearly in all of our interests to do that. But at the same time, the Prime Minister is quite rightly saying, look, if we can't get progress by next European Council, we are going to need to draw a line in the sand so that businesses can actually prepare for the end of the year without a free trade deal.
And how concerned are you about things like the EU state aid rules, even if we did decide to give up that in return for, say, the fishing? We know that negotiations and trade deals often have some things where you win, some things where you lose. That's part of how these things work. If we did end up with the EU having some say over what level of state aid we give, would that be a deal breaker for you?
Yeah, I think it would actually. I think, you don't normally have subsidy regimes, state aid rules within a free trade deal. It's not part of what you would expect to see. The UK will have, I'm absolutely sure, as business secretary, that was something I was working on, our own subsidy regime. You need to have a set of rules that businesses can see, and if nothing else, to make sure that ministers don't have to approve every single time a business asks for state support. So you need a set of rules that will be important for the UK internal market too, but you do not need to abide by the EU's rules. So yes, I think that is a potential deal breaker. As an independent nation that has left the European Union, it's just not reasonable for them to expect us to sign up to their rules on an ongoing basis.
Lance Foreman, the former Brexit Party MP and MEP, and of course the businessman himself, he said regarding state aid, we should not be subsidising businesses anyway. So I'm not concerned about that, but I am concerned that if we can't control our tax policy. We keep hearing that the EU governments often breach this. Why don't we provide a catalogue of breaches and present it to the EU for comment? Do you think that we need to play a little bit more hardball than even Lord Frost, our chief negotiator, is doing?
Well, we want to get a free trade deal. What we don't want to do is to sign up to the EU's rules going forward now that we are an independent sovereign nation. We have to be allowed to organise things in the way that works best for the United Kingdom, whilst taking into account our desire to continue to trade freely with our EU friends and neighbours. So none of these things are very complicated. They are basic principles. We've left the EU. We must be able to do things our way.
And what do you say to people like, indeed, the Lib Dem MP in Remainer, because, frankly, we are still Remainers and Brexiteers, Christine Jardine, she was on the show about an hour ago, along with Brexiteer Peter Bone, but she was saying, look, this is a time that we should be looking for a longer transition period, more time to negotiate, not dealing with the changes to our relationship with the EU, whatever they end up being, at the same time as dealing with coronavirus, possible second wave, dealing with the economic fallout of the lockdown. There are a lot of people, even many Brexiteers, who might well agree with her on that. Where do you stand?
Utterly horrendous idea. We've waited so long. It was June 2016. It's more than 4 years later. People decided we were going to leave the EU. We just have to make sure that we resolve all these last outstanding issues. We left the EU in January this year, finally got out of it altogether. And all we're talking about now is the future trading relationship. We've got to get these things settled. And I get that Remainers continue to try and fight the argument over and over again. It's done. We've left. We're now just talking about the future trading arrangements. We've got to get on with it and move on.
What about the argument that the EU is the party in these negotiations that's not acting in good faith? There is some talk that actually some EU national leaders are trying to take over for Michel Barnier, going to push him to the side, given that, the tactic of all 27 acting in concert hasn't really worked, because we haven't blinked, because Boris Johnson knows he can't, because he's not got a lot of support in the country at the moment. Not got a lot of support from backbenchers, but he does still need it on Brexit. But actually, Article 50, one of the provisions of Article 50 is that there is a requirement on the EU to negotiate a suitable trade deal, not necessarily a free trade deal, but a trade deal after any country chooses under the Lisbon Treaty to leave the EU. It's something that's not been talked about much, but there is a legal requirement on the EU to enter into these negotiations properly, by putting these demands in terms of fishing rights, as if we were still in the EU, allowing the French and Spanish trawlermen to basically have full range of all our fishing waters, and demanding that they have say over whether we have UK state aid for industry. Can it be said that they are acting in good faith there?
Well, I think there's a very genuine challenge to be made. We have a very strong relationship with EU member states on a bilateral basis. But, one of the reasons why I was keen that we left the EU is precisely because the project is bigger than the rational logic of free trade between nations. And so I can well understand why Michel Barnier is wanting to play hardball and try and pin down fishing industry and pin down state aid rules and level playing field rules, because the project to him and to the Commission is so absolutely vital. But I think you'll find when you talk to the leaders of EU nations that they take a more pragmatic view, as they should, because they too face their voters. They have businesses in their economies who want to continue to trade freely with the United Kingdom. It is in all of our interests that we get over these kind of red lines or stumbling blocks that the EU have put in place and actually move forward to get that free trade deal done. And we can do it still by the end of the year with goodwill on all sides.
Just finally, I want to ask you about the furlough scheme. Evidence given by the HMRC, the taxman, to the Public Accounts Committee in the Commons yesterday. They said that they expect in any major project where they're handing out huge numbers of pounds of taxpayers' money, there's going to be a percentage given away in error and also an element of fraud. They think it could be up to £3.5 billion of the furlough scheme. We've had some surveys in recent weeks showing that a huge number of people, a very large percentage of those on the furlough schemes, were told to work by their bosses at home in a part-time basis, even though they were not allowed to do so on the furlough scheme. Do you expect that we will see a huge scale of fraud emerging on this? Not just errors, people filling out the wrong bit of the paperwork, but actual deliberate attempts to defraud the taxpayer. And what do you want to happen as a result of that?
Well, first of all, the furlough scheme was the most extraordinary, unprecedented scheme brought in place in very short order. So inevitably, because of the speed of bringing it in, it was going to be difficult to make it foolproof in terms of fraud and indeed error. So I think in the first instance, what I'd like to see is a kind of an opportunity for an amnesty. So for businesses who have either deliberately or inadvertently claimed when they shouldn't have done, to be able to actually rectify that and put things straight. I'm quite sure there will be some people who thought, well, I might just get away with this, so I'll give it a go. And for people who are not, criminally intent, then I think it would be a great shame to see them being sort of brought within some sort of criminal jurisdiction. So I think an amnesty is really important to sort things out. And then should that obviously not recoup the money that's been lost through the system, then I think HMRC will certainly need to pursue those businesses who've deliberately sought to take advantage of this pandemic.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Andrea Leadsom, Conservative MP, former Business Secretary, of course, and leading Brexiteer. 9:18 is the time.